Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome. My name is Elissa Wolf. I'll be your host today for our webinar on how to franchise your business. Had a little technical difficulties, so just a few minutes in terms of getting started. Let me share my screen. Go. Okay, put this down here. All right. Welcome to our webinar again. If you can hold your questions until the end, appreciated. Or drop them in the chat, also greatly appreciated. So before we get started, I just want to give a brief introduction to our senior counsel and founding attorney, Lynn Shelton. Lynn was not always a franchise attorney. She was not always an attorney. Lynn began her business career or her career in business and grew entrepreneurial skills and experience very quickly and early, and to include running a franchise system and growing it to upwards of 780 locations. She also has been a franchisee, so she can see it and experience it from a number of different perspectives. And it was out of that experience that she kind of had, I guess, what you could call an aha moment, and decided to shift gears, go to law school, get her JD, sit and pass for the bar, and open her law firm dedicated to advocating and helping both franchisors or emerging businesses, brands that have a concept and want to turn it into a franchise system, and also helping people who may want to invest in a franchise. And Shelton Law & Associates has been in business for more than 18 years. Lynn herself brings more than 30 years of direct franchise industry experience. So we're delighted to be with you today. And she's also multifaceted. She's a published author, very much a devoted Christian and giver. So she's spent a lot of her time as well outside of her business ministering to youth and young adults in underprivileged countries. So just a bit about her and our firm. Okay, so why are we here today? So some things we're going to talk about. How do you know if you're ready to franchise your business? What are the things that you need to do, or how do you go about franchising your business? What will it cost? How can you, how financially fruitful can you be? Will people buy your franchise? People may be loyal patrons to a particular business, but is it the type of business that can scale into an actual franchise system? You've decided to franchise your business. Now what? I will talk about some of what does it look like, real life, and then who are examples of subject matter experts to discuss on how to go about franchising your business. Okay, so whether you already have a business or you have a concept that you are contemplating, exploring, okay, is this something that could be franchised? It's important to first examine our whys. Why are we doing this? What intrinsically and explicitly are our key motivators? How will we measure success? What are our own characteristics for success that can feed into either establishing and or growing a business and turning it into a franchise? So taking a close look, for example, there isn't a wrong answer per se. So some of the people that we talk to, generational wealth is important. This is something that they may want to either start or use franchising as an expansion model to build and grow generational wealth within their family and for their family and beyond generations. So that's one possibility. Another is, there's nothing wrong with being money motivated. And some, they're looking to grow aggressively, they may have different types of goals. Maybe you want to grow fast, get bought out by private equity and go live on a beautiful island, or as oftentimes with serial entrepreneurs, they will start something, cultivate it, grow it, and capitalize on it. And then they may want to sell and move on to their next venture. So it's important to look at, what are your own goals in franchising? Are you ready to franchise your business? So if you, whether you already have an existing business or you have a concept that you're looking to test and prove, here are some pillars that are important and that you'll want to examine. So, do you have, or what will you do to build and establish a successful operating prototype? What existing credibility do you have in the marketplace for those of you who may have an existing business? Are you, have you been featured in social media, in news publications, in perhaps industry publications? How are you seen by the markets that you target, the customers and or clients that you target? How do you differentiate yourself from competitors? There are different answers to that question. It can range from you not only have a quality product, but you also are just flawless in knowing how to deliver a just, beautiful, perfect, I don't know, those might not be the right words, but let me reframe it, ideal client or customer experience. And maybe the kind of culture that you've built is another differentiator. So different things to look at. Buyer appeal. So maybe for those of you who have an existing business, what to date has made you successful? Why are clients drawn to you, whether it's B2B, B2C? And are those qualifiers and quantifiers that you can take to market? Will those same indicators replicate and repeat across a wider expanded target market? That may be regionally, that may be nationally. And there are different ways to help assess that. Systemization. Franchises often live or die by how systematized, how effectively, efficiently the systems that create the infrastructure for a franchise function. And when there are failures, how do you recuperate? How do you ensure that there's ongoing continuity? How do you ensure that customers or clients are being served? And the other side of it is from the standpoint of your franchise system, how are you serving your franchisees? All of that, there's a symbiotic relationship. So things to look at. What do I need to franchise my business? Whoops. Okay, so not unlike any strategic endeavor, particularly business related, entrepreneur related, you're going to want to start with a business plan. Have you, to date, what do the financials of your existing business show you? Or if you're endeavoring to prove a business concept, what potential future projections, what are those based on? What does the data tell you? And of course, collaborating with a well-vetted CPA and or someone who understands financial modeling and can help you, financial advisor potentially, can be very beneficial to this endeavor. Legal documents. When you step into, really, even before you actively step into franchising, what you should know is franchising is heavily regulated and overseen by the Federal Trade Commission. So you will not only be operating at the state level, you'll be operating at the federal level. And there are very real regulations, areas of compliance. In fact, there are 23 items you'll hear the term franchise disclosure document, franchise agreement, if you haven't already. And it's the body of work, the documents that basically outline the pillars, the systems, the costs, the projections for your franchise system. And they are bound by both federal and state regulations. On the state side, not all states are what we call registration states. But if you're looking to sell franchises in registration states, you must first be registered in those states. And we can get into more of that later. Operations manual. Any business requires a playbook. Do you have, do you have an operations manual in place that guides your staff, that creates a roadmap, if you will, for how to run the business? How well tooled is it? How detailed is it? This is actually a place where what we find with emerging brands, businesses that haven't franchised yet, but are looking to franchise, sometimes get stuck. They get, it's totally understandable. They may not have an existing operations manual. Sometimes, you know how if you've ever operated with tribal knowledge and the people in the company or firm just know what needs to be done because they've been doing it. May or may not be documented, or how well documented can vary. So these are areas where we can help guide and point to resources. Training programs. When you, as you award franchisees, and we use that word award very deliberately, the best franchise systems do not sell franchises, they award franchises to well-qualified, well-vetted franchisees. So make a note of that. You're wanting to bring into your system the best of the best, because that, success breeds success. So anyway, you will want to establish training programs to help guide, educate, and instruct emerging franchisees as they join your franchise system. Quality control mechanisms as you visit, as your franchise system grows and as you are visiting the different locations, what quality control mechanisms are in place to cross-check with your franchisees. Marketing plans. As the franchisor, your responsibility is to create visibility, brand visibility. What does the brand stand for? And so you're creating brand visibility depending upon what type of launch strategy you've selected. Maybe you're doing so regionally, or if you're doing so nationally, making sure that there's consistent messaging across the different platforms. However, as the franchisor, what you're not doing specifically is providing the marketing tactics that drive business directly to individual franchisees. That's their responsibility. Developing a web page and web-based marketing. There are different ways to do this. Some franchise systems will add a tab to their existing business website. Others may have a tab and by clicking on it, it will take you to a separate website. There are different ways to approach this, and we work with franchisors or emerging franchisors on what strategy may work best for them. Franchise collateral materials. What are the materials that you're going to present to prospective franchisees? How are you going to do that in order to spread your message and create materials that attract the attention and create the hook in the minds of your prospects? Designing a sales strategy. Will you be doing so in-house? What does your existing team look like? Or are you possibly going to look at leveraging franchise brokers, franchise consultants to help sell, or rather market your franchise system? Advertising. Always important. What media mix will you be using? What makes sense? What also fits within your budget? Both short-term and long-term. Personnel, another highly critical part of your responsibility as a franchisor. Who are your MVPs? How do you go about, if you have an existing business, what does your current core team consist of? What are the skills and talents operationally from an HR perspective, marketing, financial, bookkeeping, accounting? What are the different core areas that you need to staff for, and what's the best way to go about that? Capital, funding your business. There are a variety of resources available. We are not a funding resource ourselves. However, it's not unusual at all. This tends to be among the core discussion points that we'll step through with emerging brands and sometimes transfer franchisors when we're working together. How much will franchising cost and how much can I make? So legal fees nationally, the average across the United States for a first year currently is in the range of $70,000. Now, it could be less, it could be more. Much depends on what is your growth strategy, what is your budget, how aggressively do you plan to grow, what funding resources do you have in place to establish and sustain that growth. Not just, we're not talking 3 months, 6 months. We're talking 6, 12, 24 months and on. It's critical to understand what your run rate is going to be and have that modeling available. Marketing fees can vary widely, and as the same with legal fees, depending upon the market you're in, but on average, you should be expecting legal fees to be in the range year one of around $70,000, depending upon the market you're in. Manuals, drafting fees, staffing costs, huge, depending upon what part of the country you're in. Are you in a metro area? What type of business are you trying to staff for? Are there potentially certifications, even licensing that's required in order for someone to work within your business, whether they are part of your core team or franchisees that you who wish to invest in your franchise system. Broker consultant fees. Brokers and consultants work on a commission basis. Always best to ask up front. Since we're having a franchisor-centric conversation, you as the franchisor will pay them a percentage should they present to you a qualified franchisee prospect whom you end up awarding and accepting and inviting formally into your franchise system. And the percentages vary. They can be, I would say that at a minimum, you should probably plan to expect anywhere from 20%, sometimes 40%. It depends on the broker or consultant. So, just things to be talking about. However, again, they're commission only. So they're motivated to help bring you qualified prospects. Improvement costs in any business and operational endeavor, equipment, software, systems, all of the different components of your infrastructure. Important to know what over time, what aging occurs, what from a software perspective, what ongoing maintenance will be required in order to establish and sustain a system that executes flawlessly, and what are the costs, or if improvements are needed, what improvement costs might franchisees expect? Other considerations, discovery days. will become key to how you market your franchise system. So, for example, initially you may have a more intimate discovery day model. Over time, as you grow larger, you may have a more prominent event that may run a day, maybe 2 days. Again, it all depends on your franchise system. Trade shows, excellent way to help introduce your franchise to the marketplace. We've been attending franchise expos for more than, 10, 15 years, and we encourage our clients strategically, as they are ready, to consider participating. Great visibility. The people who come and attend franchise events are there specifically for franchising, and you get the benefit of networking with other emerging and established brands. What have they seen? They may or may not be within your particular industry, but what have they encountered? What have they seen be successful? And what's been their experience with the different trade shows? Websites, software. Obviously, and I spoke to some of this in improvement costs, but having, a well-branded website, and also software to support the business, critical, and there are obvious costs associated with this. Overall, one of the key roles that we help provide or play in working with our franchisor clients is helping to negotiate the best possible terms with different vendors and suppliers. Because the goal is not only for you to capitalize yourself in terms of really well-negotiated terms and pricing, but also being able to pass that on to your franchisee. State registration fees, as I alluded to previously, there are registration states in the United States. California happens to be one of them. Washington is another, and I should know them by the heart. Oregon, Virginia, Illinois, Indiana are other examples. So point being, before you can legally market, you can't even talk about your franchise system in any of those states unless you are first registered. So part of our role as your franchise law advisor is to help ensure that those registration fees and the registrations are successfully established so that you're operating both in compliance at the state level and federal level. Training fees, obviously you want to ensure that you are providing sound training to your franchisees and their staff. So as you launch your system, what training models do you need? Are they in person? Are they a hybrid of in-person, online? What materials do you need? What will your attending franchisees and their teams require? So looking at that and determining what costs may be associated. And also, those are fees that are built into your FDD. So your franchisees are going to pay for training fees. How do you earn a living? So franchise fees within the FDD, there are the initial fees that a franchisee is going to, if you will, pay to play in order to be considered. There are the initial costs of getting up and running. And then there are the overall costs of running a franchise location, or if you're a mobile brand, what does it cost overall to be a mobile member of a franchise system? And so there are those varying fees. Now, one of the other key things that comes up are royalties. As a franchisor, you are one of the key benefits of investing in a franchise is you as the franchisor, you as the emerging brand have gone through the blood, sweat, and tears and money to perfect, to hone the processes, the branding that have made you successful. that make it much easier for someone else to step in, invest in your franchise system, and along with you, take your brand to market. So before you think of reducing, or as you are trying to calculate the royalty percentage, and royalty percentages can vary greatly depending upon the type of franchise system. For the moment, well, let's leave percentages out of it. However, the key lesson here is, if you think of the 1% rule, let's imagine that you have a franchise location that generates $500,000 in sales. That's $5,000 based on 1%. Now, a one-time, one-off, okay, may not seem like a lot, but as you're growing your system, as you are bringing more franchisees into the system, you start doing the math. Imagine, even if you had 50 units, that's $250,000, $2.5 million over 10 years. But using the figures noted here, that's significant. And so before you risk diluting the value of your brand, really think through, what you're prepared to leave on the table or not. And then, of course, there are rebates. So as optimal terms have been negotiated, you'll be passing that on to your franchisees. In return, many vendors and suppliers will offer rebates to you, and that is revenue that can be invested back into your franchise system. So there are different ways to generate fees and help create a living for you as a franchisor. Will people buy your franchise? So what do you know about the customers or clients whom you currently serve? What are their buying habits? What are their criteria? Why do they patron, why are they patrons of your particular business? What is it about your business, your service, your product that they value? And will people outside of your current area, will they use your product or service? There are ways to help, what's the word I'm looking for? Do the research and conduct the market analysis in order to help answer those questions. Are you the type of person that people will enjoy working with? I'm sure you've heard, whether it's small to medium-sized businesses to companies that have grown to be the largest. There are leaders who are founders. There are founders who can also grow and mature into long-term strategic leaders over time. There are also founders whose wheelhouse may be, they're the ones that incubate and launch the business or franchise. They may or may not be, you may or may not be the person who is best equipped to lead and expand the franchise system in alignment with the growth that you're wanting to project. So really, pardon me, taking as practical and a real world review, and having your advisors around you. This is where having other subject matter experts, whether it's in legal, other entrepreneurs, particularly any who have actually done what you're attempting to do, what's been their experience, and pardon me, and then determining from there what type of team leadership strategy makes the most sense. Can you compete? How will you differentiate yourself on a broader scale? Are there hurdles to entering the market? I mentioned earlier, licenses and permits, educational requirements. As an example, we had a franchisee reach out to us a couple months ago. This was not someone we had worked with previously. Sadly, the franchisor was in an industry that required a general contractor's license. That information was not disclosed to the franchisee. So the franchisee invested in the franchise only to discover after the fact they were required to have a GC license. It took them a year to acquire that license. So imagine a year's delay. Shoot, imagine a 6-month delay. We know time is money. So ensuring that you've checked the boxes, you are explicit with your prospective prospective franchisees, your franchise brokers, what requirements they will need to meet before they can enter a marketplace. How do you plan to support your franchisees? That will vary again on your growth strategy, the type of business you have or franchise system that you're looking to launch. Is it online? Can it be online only? Is it a hybrid of in-person, coming to a location? What does it look like, and how to best piece it together? Okay. So oftentimes when we first meet with emerging brands, we start with a consultation. And excuse me. Okay. We start with a consultation and we step through. This is actually also a great kind of an outline of when we actually get, once we've decided to work with an emerging franchisor or transfer franchisor. This is also an effective outline of what our executive meeting, our 3-day executive meeting consists of. And one of the first things we're going to do is really, and we've been talking about it throughout the discussion this morning. What is your why? What's your exit strategy? We didn't talk about that. Well, we did, but again, taking the time to understand how much thought have you given to this, and what scenarios best align with your personality, your level of risk tolerance, risk avoidance, your budget. And so when we work with clients, we're stepping through a business questionnaire. There's a strategic planning session. Trademarks, foundationally important to franchise systems, frankly, to any business, whether you ever franchise or not. If you're an existing business and you have not taken the time to ensure that your trade name, your website, your marketing collateral, marketing collateral is an example of a possible need for copyright because it's the expression of an idea, but ensuring that your brand is protected. Please do that. We're happy to talk to you if you'd like, but whether it's us or another well-vetted trademark attorney, crucial step. And it's even more crucial in franchising because the last thing you want is, you've not only invested a lot of time, effort, and money in establishing your business, but now more than ever, you can't afford to have somebody else somewhere else scoop your trade name right out from under you. One of the very first topics of discussion with a franchisor client is your IP. What is it? How are we going to protect it? What strategy are we going to use? And whether that's a domestic only IP protection strategy or potentially domestic and international. Really important that you have those key conversations. Marketing review. We are not a marketing firm. However, we know the key hallmarks to look for in order to how best to take a brand to market. So we will be, and we partner. We have relationships with other resources that can help you with your marketing review. Franchise brokers, will you be leveraging the franchise broker network to help sell or market your system to potential franchisees? CPA, again, should be a key member of your advisory team. What are the financial models say? What projections do you have? CCIM, these are the PhDs of commercial real estate. They have been in the industry for at least 10 years. They must be certified in order to operate with this designation. And they don't just understand, we've all heard the saying, location, location, location. It's much more than that. It's going back to who is your target client or customer? What is their psychology? What are the things that motivate them to a given brand or a given service? And understanding that psychology, we call it psychographic analysis. There's also demographic analysis, but the psychographic analysis and where those consumers or clients, where do they frequent? That is critical to site selection. You could have the most, seemingly marquee commercial real estate location, but if your particular customers or clients don't frequent that area, then, you're at great risk of having either yourself as with a corporate franchise location or potentially one of your franchisees having a location that fails to serve them effectively and you. Funding partners for franchisees. Again, we're not a funding resource ourselves. However, we can certainly help offer insight into potential resources that are available, both to you as a franchisor, as well as potentially sharing these resources with your franchisees. Talked about trademarks, or we began. We go into great depth. The trademarks are going to protect, and the classifications will be determining what specific goods or services the trademark is applied to. We will help determine what specimens. Is it a logo? What is it? How will we craft what we call your trademark strategy as we're putting your application together to submit to the United States Patent and Trademark Office. This is, and here's the other thing, is time. As they say, time is the death of all sales. Well, time can be death to a business or a franchise system that's trying to effectively launch. I bring this up here because if you've never submitted an application to the USPTO, it's only the beginning when you submit the application. It will take 5 to 7 months before your application will actually be assigned to an examining attorney's docket at the USPTO. So imagine maybe you tried to do it yourself. You submit an application, it hits the examining attorney's desk, you get an office action response, or you get an office action response and you, for whatever reason, you didn't receive it. Ensuring that any office action responses are responded to in a timely and prompt manner is critical so that we are minimizing and mitigating the time it takes to get your brand IP protected. And again, much of this is covered in the franchisor business questionnaire. Think of it like a checklist. Our strategic planning session, which is 3 days, and again, trademark. Foundational systems, software. These are the components that represent your infrastructure. And this is another part in your journey where we'll be helping you not only look at, for example, are the vendors or suppliers that you've used to date, will they continue to be? Are they still the best vendors or suppliers to sustain, and are they able to scale with your franchise system as it grows? They may or may not be. And so taking a good look at that, and if perhaps you will need to add future vendors or different vendors into your system, who are they? And then again, always looking to help you negotiate for optimal terms so that you can pass that on to your franchisees. And another part of being a franchisor, and the rules are not always the same for each franchise system. In fact, they're not. You may decide to mandate that your franchisees purchase their equipment, supplies, etc., through the suppliers and vendors that you identify. There may be places where you can be more lenient. But again, these are discussions to have, and really be sure you're making prudent and strategic decisions for the long term, to include training and your manuals. Marketing message, marketing review. Will you be leveraging franchise brokers? We talked about they are commissioned only professionals. You may or may not to decide to use them at the beginning. You may decide to wait. But again, stepping through the conversation of what growth strategy have you identified? How quickly are you trying to grow? And what is it going to take to help you achieve those milestones measurably? And then, of course, your CCIM, site selection, site approval, funding partners for franchisees. We offer this as just pictures can help make things, can simplify things. We endeavor to be extremely thorough, and we work on a flat fee basis. So we don't ask for the full amount up front. Actually, I need to fix this slide. So for those of you who are watching, you can call me out on this. We've presented the material. So normally it's a $10,000 deposit, and then there is a monthly fee that's payable, that begins due following the executive meeting, which is typically within 60 days of choosing to work with us when you sign your agreement. After you launch as a franchise system, what can we do? There are a variety of services. We're not only a franchise law firm, we're a business law firm. We specialize in intellectual property. Actually, franchising is under intellectual property law at the federal level. So we are licensed and knowledgeable in being able to help our franchisor clients in a variety of areas, including lease reviews. Lease reviews in franchising are not the same as they are in as a standard commercial lease. So it's very prudent to have the help, the filter, if you will, of a well-vetted franchise attorney who understands leasing in the franchise realm, who can look for what we call franchise-friendly terms. That's part of our secret sauce. Legal entity creations, franchise agreement negotiations, existing buy-sell agreements. There are a range of services that can become pertinent and helpful, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. Our goal is to provide a wheelhouse of expertise that can be adaptable and flexible to the needs of our clients, and yet comprehensive. Before you sit down with franchisees, it's important to be thinking about, who best represents an ideal franchisee for your brand. What would they be looking for? What level of risk tolerance or risk avoidance best characterizes an ideal franchisee? What level of long-term financial gain are they looking for? And these are certainly questions. This can be part of your qualification process. And also, as you're having conversations with different franchise brokers and franchise consultants, what does their qualification process look like, and how does it align with your own? Um, a franchisee may want to be their own boss. However, do they have the foundational grit to be able to walk it out? And if there are gaps, where may those gaps possibly exist? How important is control to them? Because in this scenario, yes, they're going to have the opportunity to have control over their franchise location to a degree, but you're sharing control because you're offering them a system that can successfully replicate itself. And so they need to be willing to share. Sharing is caring. But in this context, do they have a sharing personality? Or are maybe some of their, or is control so high on the register that the balance may or may not exist? So something to think about. Because rather than them having to go out and create this from ground zero, you're offering them the system that they can go out and replicate. So there's a trade-off. The sales pipeline. From left to right, there are going to be, that you have publicity, you have print advertising, trade show attendance, direct mail campaigns, internet leads, broker, franchise consultants. What are the commissioned, what are the commissions that you may need to be paying to your franchise consultants? Referral sources, walk-ins. And so based upon, and not everybody's media mix for marketing and advertising will look the same, but depending upon the ingredients that you choose to go to market with, what determines the timeline of your sales cycle? How many, if it takes 30 to 60 days to bring in a prospect for a first meeting, how many leads do you need to generate, qualified leads do you need to generate in order to build a pipeline that sustains and will measurably deliver the close ratio you require? So these are things to look at. Last but not least, there's a great paradigm of we make a living by what we get. However, we make a life by what we give. And the brands out there that truly endure and are viewed as what we could call marquee brands are those who not only provide a system and a vehicle, a path for revenue generation, but they have something that endures beyond that incredible commitment to building customer loyalty in a meaningful way, creating that marquee customer experience, treating their employees with dignity and respect, being community minded. There are different types of legacies that we want to lead. And so what we're finding is many of our franchisor clients sometimes want a community minded or a special charity that their franchisees, part of the proceeds from the franchisees would go to. It depends from franchisor to franchisor. But bottom line, everybody needs to win. If this has triggered some ideas, or maybe you've been, percolating about franchising or possibly franchising, get in touch with us. You're welcome to schedule a consultation, pick up the phone, or you can also email us. I don't have it on here, but you can email franchising@sla.law. Again, franchising@sla.law. And let us know your situation. We'll be happy to set something up with you. pick up the phone and give us a call. Either way, and if you would like to be eligible for a special discount, you can also text Expo to the number there, and we'll include that, particularly since I advertised a reduced price for the deposit. But again, we appreciate your time and attention, and look forward to hearing from you in the near future. Thanks so much.